Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and anybody who believes they don't fit into either of those two categories or prefer to be referred to by another title. Welcome to the Fishosophy channel. This is video number 1. So I suppose I should really start by explaining what this channel is planning to do. So I'm going to be looking at current affairs and reviewing them with a critical eye, and looking at the philosophical implications. There'll be some key themes here, equality being one of the biggest one. I'm very, very pro equal opportunities, and quite anti equality of outcome, where you try and enforce equality. And that will be, I won't expand on that right now because that will be something that comes up repeatedly during the course of the videos. And I would also be looking at some basic rights like freedom of speech, right to religion, the impact of religions on modern society, and politics in general, I'm sure will come up. And the key here is to stimulate people to debate. First of all, we mostly live in democratic societies, and I believe the key to democracy is debate and discussion. Without it, it will fail. And I welcome people to submit rebuttal videos, to submit videos of support. The best I'll, of course, link to the channel so other people can enjoy them. Comments will be open down below. I will ask the obligatory thing that everybody asks but doesn't seem to receive, but you know, I can but try, and that is try and keep your comments polite, even if you're disagreeing with people. Don't make it about attacks on people, make it about the issues they're talking about. Now, there'll be some frosty issues here, especially if we start discussing things like religion, where people can take offense on behalf of the things they believe in, even when attacks aren't meant for themselves. And I suppose we're going to have to cross those bridges when we cross those issues. But as I say, I'd ask people to keep it polite. So today I find myself in the unusual position of defending three people in particular, but a concept more than that, that have recently voiced opinions that I think are totally wrong. Which is an interesting position with which to start your first video. So I'm going to start with the biggest one, and probably the most obvious one. And unless you've had your head buried firmly in the sand or been living the life of a hermit, and if you have been living the life of a hermit, why is the first thing you've done after coming out of solitude to go onto YouTube and stop watching videos? It's a mystery to me. But unless you've really not been paying attention to the news, you will be aware of Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump's recent press release. Back on the 7th of December, on his website, donaldjtrump.com, and I will put the link down below to the statement, a statement was released saying the following: Donald J. Trump is calling for a total, complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what's going on. He then goes on to talk about some research that you can read yourself if you click the link, and he ends by saying it is obvious to anybody the hatred is beyond comprehension. Where this hatred comes from and why, we will have to determine. Until we are able to determine and understand this problem and the dangerous threat it poses, our country cannot be the victims of horrendous attacks by the people that believe only in jihad, have no sense of reason or respect for human life. If I win the election for president, we're going to make America great again. Signed, Donald J. Trump. to give this a little bit more background, there's been some other controversial statements that Donald Trump has made on the topic of Muslims in the United States, in relation to specifically the situation in Syria and recent terrorist acts. He was, and I have to say that these questions were very much leading questions by the reporter interviewing him, but he was pushed into saying that he believed that all Muslims should be, a database should be kept of all Muslims in the United States, and he didn't decline the idea of some kind of badge marking them out. Now, this was clearly an attempt at manipulation by the reporter in question, to try and sort of draw parallels to Donald Trump and the ideology of the German Nazi Party in the 1930s, especially with relation to their treatment of the Jews. More on that subject later. But the fact that he didn't deny it, and he's supposed to be a clever politician who's supposed to be a candidate to be president of the number one military power in the world, the United States of America, and he didn't, if that, it was an obvious trap, and he chose to spring it. So it's obviously hovers at least close to his opinions, which do seem very ill-informed on a lot of subjects. There we go. But undeniably, Donald Trump is popular. According to polling data taken yesterday that's reviewed the presidential campaign since the start of July that I can see, Donald Trump has shot up the rankings in the Republican presidential nomination competition. Absolutely flown up. He's currently the lead runner on 33 points. His closest rival is Ted Cruz on 16.1, and then the Rubio on 12.6 and Carson on 12. Back in August, he is when he took the lead, but only between 15 and 24 points that month. So, despite all his recent outbursts, and since the one on the 7th, his popularity has grown. So he obviously represents the views of a lot of people, or the protest voters as well, who are obviously objecting to politically correct politics. I'm sure there's an element of that as well, but I haven't got polling data or anything like that to back that up, so that's purely speculation. But I think most liberal-minded people can see that preventing Muslims from travelling to the United States is not going to help with the situation on terror. It's not going to help, at all, that I can think. All it's going to do is build tensions, etc., etc. But Donald Trump is, sadly, entitled to that opinion. Everybody is entitled to hold whatever political views they want. If you suddenly start dictating what political views people are allowed to have and what they're not, you cease to have a democratic society. So, while I strongly disagree with pretty much every policy I've heard of from Donald Trump, policies about putting walls between the US and the Mexican border, which incidentally he plans to make Mexico pay for. Good luck with that. I don't imagine he's going to get any Mexican laborers to help build it, though he might do. Who knows? But yes, I can't emphasize enough how much I disagree with Donald Trump's views, and I'm not going to spend ages here talking about how dumb they are. His political ethos and mine couldn't be much further apart. But there we go. But what has concerned me, stroke amused me, stroke not surprised me at all, was the reaction. Back here in the UK, one of the first things that happened was an online petition was created to have Donald Trump banned from coming to the UK. I believe the number now is over 600,000. But the last time I checked a news article, which was on the day this was created, it had reached 370,000 in the first day signatories of this petition. It was a petition raised via the government petition system. Any petition that gets over 100,000 votes in the UK gets submitted to Parliament for them to decide whether it merits discussion. Now, I think any over about 20,000 gets some kind of response from the government. I can't remember the exact number. I would have to look that up. It's not really relevant here, but the point was there was a significant number of people, over 500,000, if the number I heard on the radio earlier today was accurate, who wanted Donald Trump banned from coming to the UK because he had an opinion that they didn't agree with. Now, first of all, I probably don't need to point out the epic hypocrisy of this. Donald Trump is proposing having a whole bunch of people banned from coming to the United States because he doesn't understand their ideology and doesn't agree with it. As these people want to have Donald Trump banned from coming to the UK because they don't agree with his ideology. That is hypocrisy of the first magnitude. The second thing is, it fundamentally, if we were to do this, if everybody whose opinion we didn't agree with, we attempted to ban or censor, then our opinions would never change. Society would stagnate. It would never progress. Democracy requires everybody to have a voice, no matter how small it is. Everybody needs to have a voice because it's the contrary opinions, and not necessarily all of them, probably a tiny percentage of them, that come along, get heard, and people embrace, and they lead to positive change. Just to give an idea of how bonkers this were, British politicians and political figures, notably Natalie Bennett, who is the leader of the Green Party, which at the last general election secured the sixth most votes, 1.2 million nearly votes, which was 4.7% of the vote share in the general election. They're not an insignificant political party, and while they don't do massively well at general elections, they have an awful lot of representatives at regional stroke council level. And that's where they're very strong. So the leader of this key political organisation, as well as one of the politicians for the Labour Party, whose name eludes me right now, it's not particularly important. The Labour Party is Britain's second biggest political organisation, but came out in support of this very undemocratic thing. So this diagram sums up the evolution of democracy badly, but hopefully it'll be sufficient to make my point here. So for a democratic system to work, you need the initial ideas that get filtered by the democratic process. People discuss them, people debate them, people think about them, and these are then used to form law and social norms and morality to a greater or lesser extent. Then over time, more ideas come in from other sources, new ideals, we put in place a law and find that it doesn't work quite as we expected. The more ideas come in, they get filtered through the process again. Many of those ideas will be bad, but the good ones work their way through, and that law evolves. The danger we have when we prevent people like Donald Trump from having a voice, even though we don't want to hear what they've got to say, is that while his ideas, I personally believe, are absolutely awful. I mean, there's obviously a significant number of people in the United States who support his ideas, which is a quite frightening sign of our times, because I do genuinely think you can draw parallels to his political ideology and that of the Nazi Party of the 1930s Germany. But that issue aside, even good ideas, when they come through, are rarely popular. They usually go against the norm. So if you start saying any idea that doesn't agree with how we presently think, then you sacrifice things. Martin Luther King, for example, in the 1960s, campaigning for rights for black people in the United States. His ideas were clearly deeply unpopular, evident from the fact that he got assassinated. But now looking back in hindsight, if he hadn't been given that opportunity, if he hadn't had that voice, and someone did try to shut that voice down, in fact very successfully did, though in the long run it wasn't effective. But and thank God too. But you know, or to pick another example, the women's suffrage movement in the UK, really, it can be traced back as early as 1818, where noted philosopher and advocate of utilitarianism, Jeremy Bentham, advocates women's suffrage. Of course, in 1832, just a few short years later, where we confirmed by law that women weren't allowed to vote. But eventually, wars and the First World War in particular, where women were forced to work, and then the actions of the suffrage movement from the early 20th century resulted in the moves we have now towards, we've got relative equality in our society, certainly compared to any period of time. And the Western world, there's laws to protect equality, and that's a great thing. So those people wouldn't have achieved those great things had we applied the same rule as is trying to be applied here. We don't agree with this person, so we shut down their voice. So that's was point number one. Donald Trump. I mean, he's a grade A muppet as far as I'm concerned, and I think that's probably being unfair to Kermit and Gonzo and Miss Piggy and all those lovable characters. He's just if you can't say anything polite, don't say anything, I guess. So I'll move on. So character number 2 in this week's review of the news is this man, the world heavyweight boxing champion, Tyson Fury. So on the 28th of November, Tyson Fury was considered by most to be the underdog in a fight with Vladimir Klitschko, the Ukrainian heavyweight boxer and politician. An interesting combination. But then if you've seen any of the recent politics coming out of Ukraine recently, you might understand why boxing would be a useful skill in their parliament, and dodging flying glasses of water. If you haven't seen it, do watch it. It's certainly more interesting than the vigorous debate we have here in the UK, and I think actually the debate we have in our parliament is relatively interesting. But there isn't trying to pick people up, trying to throw punches, and throwing glasses at each other like you get in Ukraine. So Tyson Fury came under fire because he said things like the best place for a woman is on her back, and has publicly criticised homosexuality and abortion. Now, normally boxers aren't judged too harshly on their political ideology or their outlook on sexuality outlook on gender equality. These aren't qualifications you need to be a boxer. Largely, you need to be resilient, fast, and able to, beat someone up and render them unconscious using punches. And that last thing Tyson Fury is clearly very good at, which is why he's now the holder of the WBA, IBF, and WBO titles. But the contention has risen because Tyson Fury has been included in the Sports Personality of the Year competition, which is hosted by the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, and it nominates British sports people from all fields of sport, be it motorsport, athletics, boxing, football, or soccer if you're in the US, they call it that. Whatever sport, cricket, whatever sport, if someone has gone on to achieve great things, they'll be one of the nominees for the Sports Personality of the Year award. And clearly, with his 3 titles, on sporting merit alone, Tyson Fury probably deserves the nomination. It's also of note that the BBC is supposed to be a politically neutral organisation. Now, the way this competition works is a panel select candidates to be nominated, and then the public votes on the issue, and the person that they believe should be Sports Personality of the Year is presented the reasonably prestigious award. Now, unsurprisingly, the kind of comments that Fury has made and the opinions he espouses have upset some people. And I can understand why. I don't agree with any of them, really. Not even really, I just don't agree with any of them. But, and this is not some sort of stage for democratic protest or to make a political statement or anything like that. It's to acknowledge people's sporting performance. So it's not quite like the Donald Trump issue, but people's response, instead of just campaigning for people to not vote for Tyson Fury, is to campaign to have him excluded from the process. And well, I can't bring myself to massively care because it's Sports Personality of the Year. It's not, it's a nice award. You get to be on TV for a little while, and you get a nice trophy to put in your display cabinet, and a degree of recognition for the country for the thing you've achieved. It's not going to impact heavily on the way laws are made or how society is pushed, but it's this instinctive response to say, we don't agree with this person, shut them down, close them off, don't let them do anything. Now, it's one thing to say, don't vote for this person because they've said this. It's another to say they don't deserve to be in this competition because they've said this. When the competition is not which sportsman has the most agreeable opinion on sexual equality, which sportsman has been a champion for women's rights, or whatever the issue, which sportsman has been a champion for gay rights. It's about which sportsmen have achieved great things in their field, and Tyson Fury clearly has. So I would be pro people campaigning for him to not get the vote. I support the BBC in saying he's going to be in the competition based on the selection criteria, etc., etc. And I'll put a link to the article down below. And I wish people would have a stop and think about the implications of the way they approach things. Because, as I say, if we stopped, the nature of the competition is to award people for sporting achievement. And what they think about anything, really, well, apart from sports, but their attitudes towards sexual equality, for example, should have no bearing on something that's nothing to do with that issue. Except in as much as you nominate the person you want to see get the award, and you're obviously not going to nominate a person who you strongly dislike because of their opinions, and that's your right. I'm not advocating people are forced to vote for anybody. You can pick whatever reasons you want to vote for a person in the competition, but in terms of who gets nominated for the competition, it's based purely on their sporting performance. So that brings me neatly to my last person, who I am going to call some German bloke. The German bloke in question has been named as Marcel Zech, who is a member of a far-right National Democratic Party in Germany. And Mr. Zech was photographed, I believe the photograph was taken at a swimming pool, and the photograph shows a tattoo that he has had on his back. The tattoo is supposed to depict the Auschwitz concentration camp. That's the little tower and the barbed wire fences, and underneath the slogan says, when translated into English, to each his own, and this slogan was reportedly on the gate of the Buchwald concentration camp. So clearly he is showing his support, or certainly has a strange sense of irony, of the activities of the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s. I'm not going to go into a long rant now about why the Nazis were bad, but the Nazis were bad. They were very bad people. Hitler was a bad man. They were evil, horrible people. And for this guy to support them, and he is reported to be a member of the National Democratic Party in Germany, which is a far-right party, and so it's likely that this tattoo wasn't done with a sense of irony. For him to support them, it shows he has sympathies, at the very, very least, to the Nazis and what they did. I think it's fair to say his judgment in getting this tattoo was probably pretty poor. We'll leave it at that. Now, Mr. Zech is, and if I pronounced that wrong, and you're going to take offence to that, I frankly don't care. You've got a tattoo of Auschwitz on your back. You deserve a little bit of offence. So yeah, I'm probably being polite by calling you by your name, but there we go. Children might be listening, so. He's been charged with incitement to hatred, which is a big crime in Germany, and there's several laws, or at least one, but there's strict laws against the promotion of Nazi ideology in Germany. And Mr. Zech is facing a potential 5 years in prison for this tattoo. Now, while I fully agree with the sentiment, the last thing we want is Nazism rising. If you believe in democratic principles and the right to have whatever political opinion you like and to express that through a democratic process, and the Nazi Party did rise to power very democratically. Well, if you exclude all of the stabbing their political rivals in the back and having people executed, but they certainly got a very high percentage of the votes when they finally did get into power, which is alarming, very, very alarming. But that historical trivia aside, if you say your country stands up for democratic ideals, you have to be tolerant of this man's opinion. He's entitled to it. It's a stupid opinion, but he is entitled to it. And going to prison for 5 years for having a tattoo, that's really daft. And I think it's hard to say that, for example, people were up in arms in moral outrage at the killings in France, at Charlie Hebdo, because of the magazine publishing images depicting the Prophet Muhammad, people argued that there's freedom of press, there's freedom to display images, there's freedoms to have that opinion and do that thing. And it's the same here. I mean, it might not be a popular opinion. I think I can't understand why someone would have a tattoo done of one of the biggest murder camps that has ever existed, a place where a place that was basically a factory designed for the purpose of committing genocide, a horrific place, and to have that tattooed on you shows you're some messed up sicko. But you're allowed to be a messed up sicko as long as you don't actually go and hurt people. Now, the second people take their ideals and act upon them, and that goes against the laws and the ideals of society, then they have done something wrong, and then it's fine to judge and prosecute them. Until that point, until they take action, they're allowed to think whatever they like and say whatever the hell they like. Anyway, I think I've probably conveyed the point I'm trying to make here, and that is that if you believe in liberal ideals and a free society and freedom of speech and freedom of thought, then trying to repress anybody whose ideals disagree with your own is undermining your position, and ultimately society will lose out because of it. I hope you found this interesting. I look forward to your comments and responses. Incidentally, I'm hopefully going to continue playing videos of fish idly swimming around because A, it's more interesting than watching me talk into a microphone, and B, I find it relaxing, and C, because it means I can use the word fish in the name of the channel and it makes some sort of sense. But if anyone does have videos of their fish that they wish to have used on future videos, please do comment down below and I will find a way of getting in contact with you. I would be happy to use them, and you will of course get credited for sending it over, because why the heck not? And I'm sure you'll get bored of this video eventually. This 4 minutes and 20 something seconds that's been continually looping and is badly stitched together. I didn't really clean the glass very well, so it's a little bit blurry, and whenever the fish get close, they go out of focus. But production values. First video, who cares? But yeah, if anyone wants to submit a video, why the heck not? Hopefully, I will try and get out at least one video every week. I might be optimistic. You might have to wait 2 weeks, and then I'll do 2 in quick succession. A, it depends what the news throws at me, and B, reasons. And hopefully, I will see you all for the next video. Until then, goodbye. On a final note, I'd like to apologise for the coughing and splutting and all the vile noises I've made throughout this video. I had man flu, which meant I was facing near certain death recently, and I am finally getting over it now.